I returned to my father's auto company after earning my engineering degree, hoping to blend my hands-on mechanical expertise with fresh business insights. During my first executive meeting, my father publicly humiliated me, calling me a grease monkey who doesn't belong among real businessmen. The crushing betrayal from my own father in front of colleagues who once respected me leaves me devastated but determined to prove my worth. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from today. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been underestimated by family. Growing up with Jackson Turner was never easy. My father built Turner Motors from nothing, turning a small repair shop into one of the most respected automotive companies in our state. He was a titan in the industry, known for his cutthroat business tactics and uncompromising standards. While he conquered the business world, I found my own paradise in the company garage. As a kid, I would spend every weekend at that garage learning from mechanics who taught me everything about engines while my father stayed upstairs handling paperwork and phone calls. Those grease-stained men became my real teachers, showing patience that my father never could. They would ruffle my hair and say, "Ivan, you got the touch, boy. You understand these machines better than folks twice your age." My mother, Sarah, was always the bridge between us. She understood both worlds, my father's ambition and my mechanical curiosity. She would translate my excitement about fixing my first carburetor into terms that made my father nod with something almost resembling approval. Those moments were rare, but precious. When I turned 15, everything changed. Mom was diagnosed with cancer, and within 6 months she was gone. The bridge between my father and me collapsed completely. Without her gentle mediation, our conversations became shorter, our misunderstandings more frequent. The dinner table became a battlefield of silence. By my senior year of high school, the tension reached its peak when I announced my decision to study mechanical engineering instead of business administration. My father slammed his fist on the table. "The Turner legacy is built on business acumen, not grease under fingernails," he shouted. "Your brother understood that." James, my older brother who died in a car accident during his second year of business school, had always been the golden child. He embraced our father's path without question. After his death, the pressure on me to fill his shoes became unbearable. Despite my father's opposition, I stood firm. I enrolled in engineering school and worked part-time at different auto shops throughout college. While my classmates spent weekends partying, I was diagnosing engine problems and developing a reputation as someone who could fix the unfixable. My professors recognized my talent, especially Dr. Alan Wright, who became the mentor I desperately needed. When I graduated with honors, I had several job offers from prestigious engineering firms, but something pulled me back to Turner Motors. Maybe it was the naive hope that my education and experience would finally earn my father's respect. Maybe it was the memory of my mother saying family businesses were meant to keep families together. Whatever the reason, I returned with a portfolio full of innovative ideas for improving engine efficiency and modernizing our production line. The employees who remembered me as a curious kid gave me warm welcomes. Frank from the paint shop hugged me like a long-lost son. Maria in accounting showed me pictures of her kids who were now in college themselves. Even Linda Harris, our operations manager, who had been my mother's closest friend, seemed genuinely happy to see me. "Your mother would be proud," she whispered during my first week back. "You turned out exactly as she hoped." For a brief moment, I believed I could bridge the gap with my father through our shared love of cars. Different approaches, same passion. I prepared meticulously for the quarterly executive meeting, creating detailed presentations on how we could reduce production costs while improving quality. The night before, I even found myself reminiscing about rare fishing trips with my father before Mom died, moments when his approval felt within reach. I was finally going to show him that my path was valid too, that I could contribute something valuable to his legacy, that his son, the grease monkey, had grown into someone worth respecting. I had no idea how spectacularly that hope would shatter. The executive boardroom at Turner Motors had always intimidated me, even as a child peeking through the doorway. Now, sitting at the massive mahogany table with 12 executives in tailored suits, that feeling returned tenfold. My palms sweated as I arranged my presentation materials, glancing occasionally at my father at the head of the table, his face unreadable. When the meeting began, my father introduced me with clinical detachment. "As some of you know, my son Ivan has joined us after completing his engineering degree. He has some ideas to present today. No mention of my honors, my experience, or my innovations. Just the bare minimum acknowledgement of my existence. I stood up, pushing down my disappointment, and began presenting my proposals for streamlining the production line with new technology that would reduce waste by 20%. I showed prototypes of my engine modifications that improved fuel efficiency without sacrificing power. The numbers spoke for themselves, potential savings of millions over 5 years with relatively modest initial investment. To my surprise, several executives seemed genuinely interested. Thomas from finance asked insightful questions about implementation costs. Barbara from marketing could already see promotional angles for our more efficient vehicles. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe this might actually work. Then my father cleared his throat. "These ideas are academically interesting," he said, emphasizing the word as if it were an insult, but impractical in the real world of automotive manufacturing. I respectfully disagreed, pointing to my data and research. Actually, these modifications have been tested extensively. The results are consistent across different vehicle types, and theoretical tests in university labs, my father interrupted, are not the same as production line realities. His tone hardened with each word. I tried again, explaining how similar implementations had worked for other companies. Thomas nodded along, apparently seeing the potential, which only seemed to irritate my father further. The temperature in the room seemed to drop with each passing minute. "With all due respect," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I've worked on production floors throughout college. These aren't just theoretical." That was when it happened. My father's face turned crimson as he slammed his palm on the table. Everyone froze. "We don't need grease monkeys like you telling us how to run this business," he shouted, spittle flying from his lips. "Real businessmen make decisions here, not mechanics who think changing oil gives them insight into corporate strategy." The silence that followed was absolute. 12 executives suddenly became intensely interested in their notepads, coffee cups, or the ceiling tiles. No one dared to make eye contact with either of us. The words hit me like physical blows. Grease monkey. Not even worthy of being called an engineer, let alone his son. In that moment, 24 years of seeking approval collapsed into a single point of humiliation. But my father wasn't finished. Your brother would have understood the bigger picture. James knew what this company needed. He wouldn't waste our time with these fantasies. The mention of James was the final twist of the knife. My dead brother, forever perfect because he never lived long enough to disappoint anyone. I'd been competing with a ghost my entire life. I gathered my papers with trembling hands. Every instinct screamed at me to defend myself, to shout back, to make a scene worthy of this betrayal. Instead, I straightened my tie, looked my father directly in the eyes, and said quietly, "Thank you for the opportunity to present." Then I walked out, closing the door gently behind me. Linda Harris caught up to me in the hallway, her eyes filled with sympathy. "Ivan, he didn't mean." "He meant every word," I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. I cleared out my desk while colleagues pretended not to notice. The family photos, engineering awards, and project files fit into a single cardboard box. 4 years of education and a lifetime of passion reduced to items I could carry in one trip to the parking lot. My father found me there, standing beside my car with the box. For a moment, a flicker of something regret perhaps crossed his face, but his next words eliminated any doubt about his true feelings. "You'll never amount to anything if you can't adapt to the real business world," he said coldly. "Turner Motors needs leaders, not tinkerers." I placed the box in my trunk and looked at him one last time. "Goodbye, Dad." As I drove away from Turner Motors, I believed it was for good. I had no idea that 5 years later, everything would come full circle in ways neither of us could have imagined. I spent that first night on my friend Marcus's couch, staring at the ceiling until dawn. For a week, I barely ate or slept, replaying my father's words on endless loop. Grease monkey, the contempt in his voice, the public humiliation, the comparison to my dead brother. Each memory burned like acid. "You need to get out of this apartment," Marcus finally said after watching me shuffle around like a zombie. "This isn't you, Ivan. You've never let anyone define your worth before." He was right, but knowing it and feeling it were different things. When the person who tears you down is your own father, the wounds cut deeper. The turning point came unexpectedly. I was grabbing coffee one morning when Dr. Alan Wright, my former engineering professor, spotted me from across the cafe. Ivan Turner, he called out, genuine pleasure in his voice. I heard you went back to your family business. How's that going? The question brought everything rushing back. Before I could stop myself, the whole story came pouring out. Dr. Wright listened intently, his expression growing serious. When I finished, he said something that changed everything. Ivan, some of the greatest innovations in history came from people who were rejected by the establishment. Your father sees business and engineering as separate worlds because that's how things used to be. You see their integration because that's the future. He leaned forward. Stop seeking validation from someone who cannot see beyond his own paradigm. Your ideas deserve to be realized with or without Turner Motors. Those words were the permission I needed to redirect my energy. Instead of wallowing in rejection, I started applying to engineering positions, but nothing felt right. Each corporate environment reminded me too much of Turner Motors' rigid hierarchies, where innovative ideas died in committee meetings. Then I saw a help wanted sign at Ramirez Auto Shop, a struggling local garage. The owner, Tony Ramirez, was skeptical of my overqualified resume, but gave me a chance when I fixed a transmission issue his other mechanics couldn't solve. Engineering degree. And you want to work here? Tony asked, wiping grease from his hands. Why not some fancy corporate job? I want to work somewhere. My ideas matter, I replied simply. He shrugged. Ideas that fix cars and make money are always welcome. Unlike my father, Tony gave me freedom to implement changes. I reorganized the workshop for efficiency, introduced diagnostic protocols that saved time, and developed relationships with suppliers for better parts at lower costs. Within 6 months, the shop's profitability had doubled. Customers started requesting me, specifically impressed by repairs that lasted rather than quick fixes that required return visits. Word spread through online reviews and recommendations. Soon we were getting clients from across the state. All the while, I kept developing my own designs at night. My first patent was for a fuel system modification that reduced emissions while improving performance, the very idea my father had dismissed as impractical. When Automotive Engineering Monthly published an article about my innovation, orders started coming in from independent garages nationwide. Tony approached me one evening as I was closing up. You know you've outgrown us, right? I started to protest, but he waved me off. Not saying I want you gone. Best thing that ever happened to this place. But that brain of yours needs bigger challenges. He was right. The garage had been my healing space, but my ambitions were expanding. With Tony's blessing, I started Wright Turner Engineering on the side, naming it after my mentor and my mother's maiden name. I hired 2 recent engineering graduates and rented a small workshop space. Occasionally, news about Turner Motors reached me. Their market share was slipping. They'd lost the Miller contract to a competitor with more innovative designs. They'd laid off 30% of their workforce, including people who had been there since I was a child. Linda Harris called me one night, breaking a 2-year silence. Your father fired everyone who mentioned your fuel system design might have merit, she said without preamble. Now the company is struggling because we're falling behind on efficiency standards. I took no joy in their troubles. These were people who had been kind to me, now suffering because of my father's pride. But I couldn't fix a company that didn't want my help. Instead, I focused on building something new. Wright Turner Engineering grew steadily, developing a reputation for solving problems others couldn't. We expanded to 10 employees, then 20. I secured a small business loan to move into a proper facility. We won contracts with parts manufacturers who appreciated our innovative approach. 5 years passed this way. My company thrived while Turner Motors declined. I had proven my worth to myself and the industry, even if never to my father. I had made peace with that reality. Then came the call that changed everything. Ivan Turner. The voice was unfamiliar. This is Harold Jenkins, board member at Turner Motors. We need to talk. 5 years can change everything, yet nothing at all. Standing in the lobby of Turner Motors, I felt like both a stranger and a ghost, returning to haunt familiar halls. The receptionist didn't recognize me, directed me to the boardroom where the entire executive committee awaited. Not my father, though. His conspicuous absence spoke volumes. The company had changed. Gone was the bustling energy, replaced by a quiet desperation that hung in the air like stale smoke. Fewer desks, many empty. Outdated equipment. Faded paint. A business in decline. Harold Jenkins, a silver-haired man I vaguely remembered from my brief employment, stood to greet me. "Thank you for coming, Ivan. We appreciate you taking the time given the circumstances of your departure." The understatement almost made me laugh. 5 years since being publicly humiliated by my father, and they act like I'd simply changed jobs for better benefits. Jenkins got straight to the point. Turner Motors was failing. Their refusal to innovate had cost them major contracts. Competitors with more efficient engines were dominating the market. They were months away from bankruptcy. "We followed your success with Wright Turner Engineering," another board member said. "Your fuel system is exactly what we need." Your father, however, disagrees. I finished for her. Nods around the table. No one seems surprised. "We're prepared to offer you a consulting contract to implement your systems across our product line," Jenkins continued. "The board has authorized this decision regardless of Jackson's reservations." I leaned back, taking in the irony. The grease monkey they didn't need was now the solution to their problems. "Where is my father during this coup?" I asked. Uncomfortable glances exchanged. Finally, Linda Harris, now gray-haired but still sharp-eyed, spoke up. "He's been ill, Ivan. Heart problems. He doesn't know we're meeting you." The news should have satisfied some dark part of me that wanted justice, but it didn't. Despite everything, he was still my father. "I'll need to review your current operations before making any decisions," I said professionally. "No promises until I see what we're dealing with." They agreed eagerly. Too eagerly. The situation was worse than they were admitting. As the meeting concluded, Jenkins added casually, "Your father is usually in his office until 6, if you wanted to." I didn't, but I found myself walking that direction anyway. Jackson Turner had aged a decade in 5 years, thinner, grayer, smaller somehow in his executive chair. When I entered without knocking, he looked up with irritation that turned to shock. "What are you doing here?" No greeting, no acknowledgement of time passed. "Your board invited me. They think my company might help save yours." His face flushed that familiar anger. "Some things never change. We don't need saving by some upstart garage operation. Wright Turner Engineering has 40 employees and contracts with 5 major manufacturers," I corrected calmly. "Your board seems to think you need exactly that." He stood up, but the intimidating figure from my memory was diminished. He swayed slightly, catching himself on the desk edge. "So, you've come to gloat." The prodigal son returns to witness his father's failure. "I came because people I care about still work here," I replied. "Because this company was my mother's pride too, not just yours." The mention of my mother hit him visibly. "You walked away." "You threw me away," I countered. "There's a difference." We stared at each other across an unbridgeable gulf of pain and pride. 5 years hadn't healed anything. It had just calcified our positions. "The board can do what it wants," he finally said. "They've made that clear. But don't expect me to celebrate your triumphant return." I nodded, turning to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry about your health problems." He didn't respond. I closed the door quietly behind me. The next weeks were a blur of activity. My team conducted a comprehensive assessment of Turner Motors operations, finding outdated processes throughout. We implemented immediate changes to stop the financial bleeding while developing a long-term modernization plan. I worked directly with the production teams, many of whom remembered me from before. Frank from the paint shop hugged me again, now nearing retirement. "Always knew you'd be back," he said. "Just not like this." My father watched from a distance, saying nothing, as employees increasingly came to me with questions and problems. His silence was more telling than any criticism could have been. The first real confrontation came when I presented my complete overhaul plan to the board. My father attended, sitting in the same seat from which he'd once humiliated me. The symmetry wasn't lost on either of us. I outlined the necessary changes, modernizing the production line, implementing my fuel system across all models, retraining staff on new technologies, and a marketing campaign, emphasizing innovation and efficiency. When I finished, there was a moment of silence before the board erupted in approval. Jenkins was practically beaming. "This is exactly what we needed." Then my father spoke. "The cost is prohibitive." "The cost of not doing it is bankruptcy," I countered. "These changes will pay for themselves within 18 months. Theoretical projections, he scoffed, echoing his dismissal from years ago. No. Proven results from actual implementations at 3 different manufacturers, I corrected, sliding documentation across the table. Facts, not theories. He stared at me then, at the unanimous approval around the table. For perhaps the first time in his life, Jackson Turner realized he was outvoted. Fine, he said shortly. Try it your way. It wasn't an endorsement, but it was the closest thing to approval I'd ever received. The transformation began immediately. I split my time between Wright Turner Engineering and the revitalization of Turner Motors. We merged some operations, keeping both company names, but integrating teams where it made sense. 3 months in, we secured our first new contract. 6 months, and the company had stopped losing money. 9 months, and we were cautiously profitable again. Through it all, my father and I established a cold peace, professional interaction only, no mention of the past, no personal conversations. Then came the day I arrived at work to find my father's office empty. He'd collapsed at home. Heart attack. Serious. I found myself in the hospital waiting room, surrounded by flowers from business associates, but no family except me. The fragility of life has a way of putting grudges in perspective. When they finally let me see him, he looked smaller than ever beneath white sheets. Machines beeped steadily. His eyes opened when I sat beside his bed. The company, he asked immediately. Running smoothly, I assured him. Everything's handled. A long silence. Then, you've done well with it. Not an apology, not quite praise, but something shifted between us in that sterile room. We're implementing the new fuel system next week, I said. Production starts Monday. He nodded slightly. Your design? Yes. Another nod. Good. In that single word lay more acknowledgement than he'd given me in 29 years. Recovery took weeks. During that time, the board formally offered me the position of CEO. I accepted under one condition: my father would remain as chairman emeritus. Not out of sentimentality, but because despite everything, his experience was valuable when not clouded by pride. The first major success under the new structure came when we won back the Miller contract we'd lost years before. The client specifically cited our innovative engine design as the deciding factor. My father attended that meeting, sitting quietly in the background, watching as I closed the deal he couldn't. Afterward, as everyone celebrated, I caught his eye across the room. He held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded once, a gesture so slight others might have missed it. It wasn't a Hollywood reconciliation. We didn't suddenly become best friends or even particularly warm family, but something fundamental had changed. Respect had entered our relationship, perhaps for the first time. It has been 2 years since that turning point. Turner Wright Motors is now recognized as an industry leader in innovation, combining my father's old-school business experience with my technical expertise. We employ over 200 people, including many who lost their jobs during the company's decline. My father and I have reached an understanding that works for us. We meet weekly to discuss strategy. He offers insights from his 40 years in the industry. I listen, implement what makes sense, and gently redirect what doesn't. He has learned to trust my judgment, and I've learned to value his experience. At the company's 50th anniversary celebration last month, something remarkable happened. My father took the podium, now walking with a cane but still commanding respect. He spoke about the company's history, its challenges, and its resurgence. Then he said something that silenced the room. Turner Motors survived because it finally embraced what I resisted for too long: innovation from unexpected places. My son understood what I could not, that the future belongs to those who adapt. Not an explicit apology, but a public acknowledgement of my contribution that meant more than any private words could have. Later that night, he handed me a small box. Inside was my mother's wedding ring on a simple chain. She would have wanted you to have this, he said gruffly. She always saw something in you that I missed. I now keep that chain in my desk drawer, not to wear, but as a reminder of both where I came from and how far I've traveled. The greatest lesson from my journey isn't about engineering or business strategy. It's about knowing your own worth, even when those who should value you most fail to see it. It's about walking away when necessary, not out of anger, but self-preservation. And sometimes it's about returning on your own terms when the time is right. I've established a scholarship program for engineering students from disadvantaged backgrounds, naming it after Dr. Write who believed in me when my own father couldn't. The first recipient starts next fall. The company culture I've built values both technical expertise and business acumen, recognizing that innovation happens at all levels. My office door remains open to anyone with an idea, from executives to mechanics. Every voice matters. Last week, a young technician named Miguel approached me nervously with sketches for a new cooling system. His ideas were rough but promising. I remembered myself at his age, passionate, uncertain, needing someone to believe in him. "Let's develop this further," I told him. "Set up a meeting with the engineering team." The look on his face, surprise followed by determination, reminded me of my own journey. Another cycle beginning, but this time with a better outcome. My father and I will never have the relationship I dreamed of as a child. Some wounds heal but leave permanent scars. Yet we found a different kind of connection through shared purpose and mutual respect. As for me, I no longer need his approval to know my worth. The grease monkey he once dismissed has built something lasting. Not to prove him wrong, but to prove myself right. What about you? Have you ever walked away from something important to find your own path? Or returned to face unfinished business on your own terms? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the greatest success comes after someone tells you that you'll never succeed. Until next time, this is Ivan, signing off.